Welcome to the podcast that puts a finger on the pulse of revenue and technology. On this show, you'll hear from industry experts, executives, and investors on the art of transforming B2B businesses into scale-up insurgents. This is Revenue Uncoded.
Welcome to Revenue Uncoded.
Coded.
This week's episode with Bill Griffin, Brian Harrison. Today's special guest.
Hello, and Brian, before I do some introductions, when you look around the world of billing, there's global epicenters of telecom BSS proficiency. Israel, certainly. Scandinavia, where there's a lot of hardware manufacturers and there's offshoots of a lot of BSS vendors. Certainly in India and some other parts of the world. But one domain that doesn't necessarily get its critical acclaim is Brazil. There is a lot of technical Brazil expertise. So we have brought two aficionados from Brazil. Say hello to Luis and Marcos.
Hey.
Hello. Hey, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, and they're two aficionados who've been around on multiple BSS domains, not just one solution, but multiple in their BSS career. And then we've got the Swedish bulldog, as I like to call him, Mr. Gunnar Nyberg. Say hello, Gunnar.
Good to be here. Thank you.
There you go. So today I think we wanted to kind of take the spin, and we've done a lot about business, and we've done a lot about billing, and we've done about selection. But today we want to kind of a little more technical, and when we mean technical, probably a little more just BSS centric. What are the functions? What are the components, and kind of the important pieces of BSS functionality? So I'm probably going to be in this domain. I don't bring a lot of value add to the equation. So
What do you mean?
It means I've never coded a line of software in my life, and I prefer to keep it that way. So let's keep it with more you guys. So Brian, I'm going to let you start it, and you and Gunnar kind of drive it from there, and maybe a little more intro on the background with these guys.
Well, and especially the notion of the technical part of BSS today, as far as revenue is concerned. We want to delve into those technical details and how do those things impact a company's success or failure in their billing world. And I know all three of you have a lot of experience in that area. And those are the things we'd kind of like to delve into today. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys start off with that. I know Gunnar's got a number of experiences he's had throughout his career with working with these different companies at the executive level and the sales level and then the PMO level. And then Luis and Marcos both have the technical expertise and the background, as Bill alluded to earlier, for multiple solution interfaces, interactions between BSS, a business, their successes, and their challenges they get. So with those simple things being laid out there, let's go ahead and start it off with what are your first thoughts on that, Gunnar?
I think there's a lot of requests right now and discussions with executives in all around the world, both from startups as well as from established companies, as to how can they prepare for the future and how can they limit some of the barriers that current systems are hampering their ability to grow or go into different types of business lines and areas. And I think whether it's a startup or whether it's an established company, I'd like to open up the floor for Marcos and Luis to answer. One of my main questions is, if you have a company that you're advising, what should they think about? What are the top 3 things they should think about? Start with an established company that have a system and they growing the business into different new business lines that they haven't had before. And they're now looking at putting a transformation in place. What are 3 things that you should think about when you select a new system going forward?
Well, one thing that I have seen before, that many companies have challenges in capturing the events and what they need to monetize. It's not always an easy task. And also, once they are able to capture these events, and when I say event, can be any sort of thing, it can be a service, it can be any type of usage or anything that we can measure. They don't know exactly how to monetize that, and many times we see users using like spreadsheets and all sorts of external tools to cover that part that their current billing system cannot do by themselves.
Well, I think you kind of hit one part, the important part here, where you said could be any kind of event, and I think that's kind of the key with the total flexibility, that you actually need to be able to take any event and do anything with it, and that may not be what you have in the current situation. It may be dictated to do what you need to do with certain things and how you can consume things.
Exactly, because we cannot limit the BLCs cannot limit the incoming event. We need to understand what the company needs to monetize, how the user or the ticket or the event looks like, capture this event, and then be able to prepare to transform this event in order to be able to monetize that, to calculate what the customers or the subscriber need to pay.
So what function within the BSS is the one that is able to consume that? What is that generically called?
Oh, mediation from my perspective.
I know from your perspective, but from these guys who actually live in the billing world.
Yeah, it's usually a mediation tool, a mediation program that will capture this event and prepare this event, and then send over to a billing system, monetization system to be able to calculate.
And also, what you say in the billing side, that would be, we call rate keys. So basically, when you talk about telecom companies, if it's a voice usage, usually we use minutes, seconds. When you talk about data, you use gigabytes, megabytes. So mediation do that. Mediation pick up the data, transform the data into information, and then in our side we have the rate keys that pick up this information and transform in something that we can charge out the customers. So I would say that the rate key, that will be the point in our side of the billing system.
So that's definitely, from my experience as well, that is a key first step element as you work left to right with that BSS process and billing. What is the event streams, the data that you're going to collect in, that you're going to process, that then you need to bill through your billing system and generate that revenue stream from that? Because have you seen other issues in your experience with the timing and delivery of different event streams, then tied to visibility and to people being able to see when things come in? For example, some data may come in from a third-party vendor, but it's only once a month. So you've got to have that before a bill cycle runs, for example, something like that. Then you have other things that come in daily or real time by the second. So is there anything in that scenario that jumps out to you as key elements for someone's BSS practice to make sure they have their best foot forward in how to make that a successful transition of data capture to processing from the BSS side?
Well, I think that one of the main challenges is being able to ingest all these different external sources of information, like different mediations. Each mediation program is going to generate the data in their own format. It's not always an easy task for the billing system to be able to accommodate all these different types of input messages, or these different layouts or different formats of events or CDRs.
Yeah.
Not sure if I'm answering your question.
No, that's kind of where I was going, because that's been my experience. I kind of want to kind of talk from other people's experiences with that when I say a left to right process, I kind of start with somebody did something that triggered an event. That's all on the left side. As we move across the processing spectrum over to the right, that becomes a revenue event that is wound up on your billing system or through your billing system. It's now generating revenue for you. So that's what I mean when I say left to right, because I kind of always have looked at it from that event stream. You're going to process it, and you're going to make a bill out of that. That's your revenue stream. But it's changed a lot from when we first started. How much have you seen on differences between, or have you seen anything in the mobile space as far as billing? Have you had to work with that a lot at this point?
What I saw is that we usually if you see in the billing and telco, we saw a lot. Usually we get files, so mediation prepare the file and send it to us. But sometimes that is not when you need a real time, that's not enabled because sometimes the mediation needs 1 day, 3 days to send us.
Yeah.
And one of the approach that I saw that we don't have, the mediation does not go as in the middle of the two systems. So basically we have the billing system, we have one vendor, and so the vendor needs us to charge the customer that uses his system. So basically, instead to wait for the mediation, prepare the file, send to us, we access the information through our REST API calls, and what it brings for the customer are benefits that you can do the call by hour, and the user can see the charge and also the tax that will be applied. So I saw in some case that it was using a lot because the most difficult for the customer that they want to see the real-time charge. So today, for example, you have the app in your mobile, you have the credit card. 10 years ago, you have to wait for the bill, or have to go in the internet to see the charge, make sure. Now, when you use your credit card, you just get an SMS saying, oh, you have spent this money or not. So not is that what the customer wants, to make sure that that's a way to make the customer feel safe. So I believe that now everybody, what make the customer happy is that the point that we are real-time charge, that we can see that happens right now in 5 minutes, because in my perspective in the billing, that's what you need to provide. And I think that what the company is looking for, because in the end, the companies like telco industry is very hard, very tough industry, because everybody has a lot of expertise people, IT guys, and everybody wants to provide the best. And what I saw that the best way to provide that is that the customer needs to be happy.
There you go.
With the system.
So Gunnar, did we answer your questions, or did we just get started on? Yes, for three.
Absolutely, but I think one of the things Marco said, when you have a number of different systems feeding you events, and obviously when having a whole SOA architecture and transformation, you've got a number of different systems all integrated together. So in order to have complete flexibility, you put something together, you transform everything, it's all brand new, fresh, and done. But then you may still decide, like, I made a couple of mistakes. These are not the best of breed. I want to replace this down the road. How do you make sure that what you pick right now has the complete flexibility to not being hard-coded, integrated into these specific endpoints, but you can actually plug and play it quite a bit instead of plug and play it?
Yeah. So usually what you do is that's a configuration. So basically, let's say we have a service that we have one XML file, and then we add all the configuration needed, let's say an endpoint. So for some reason, we have a system that has to access one vendor through a one-end web service. And we don't, for some reason, it's changed, and there is no communication, a good communication between the vendor and also with us. And then we have to change it like in 1 hour. So the best way would be configuration. So to avoid to change the code, anything else. So that would be 10 minutes work instead of 1 day of work.
That's what I was going to say. I think, I think the main thing here is privileging configuration rather than coding.
Yes, and I think
so
that
you can easily change. You can easily create new endpoints or new.
What do you mean by an endpoint? What do you mean by an endpoint?
Well, where either you receive input as an event or you output to a financial system, or right. And I think because we keep
gazinhas and
about,
gazouches.
Yes.
All right.
We keep talking about being configuration when it comes to our billing model and the calculations and everything. But one thing to not forget is that having the configuration for the integration part as well, being able to quickly change if needed. Mm-hmm. The different systems you connect to, because many times I've seen you replace one thing and you now have a requirement, or the input has to be look exactly like this, and then it takes a couple of months to make sure that you receive the input that way before you can connect the other system.
And you basically just move a legacy structure, forcing everything else to conform to that structure. If you don't have a flexible configuration model in place, has been kind of what I see on that if you make it look like this and act like this, your system's going to look and act like the one you had before, because you're not advancing that flexibility forward in a convenient way. It becomes much more expensive to hard code around that pin you put in the ground to say, hey, you know what, you need to make it look like this. So that configuration piece is something we've definitely seen as well on our end, being a critical element, because it's almost like that flexibility we talked about with the mediation piece up front. Make the data come in and we want to ingest it quickly, add data to it. Our changes through our processes are evolving in that same way, at least in my mind, that the configuration pieces, the XML, the interfaces, the APIs that we're able to build that do those transformations on the fly, that seems to be where it's going in the future. Is that what you're seeing, and do you agree with that, or have a different take on that?
No, that's totally true. I remember working in a project that, given that the product we were working on was so easy to configure the incoming, the input format, the customer asked us to start receiving other information that was not related to billing at all, just because it was easy to ingest in our system and then to extract reports from our system to feed the decision makers. So it was a billing system. The information we were receiving had nothing to do with billing, but it was so easy to absorb this information in our system, or to be able to send this information over the same CDR that was inputting information for the monetization, that we started receiving this additional information and extracting reports.
So that's that visibility layer, right? You take that data, and now you're also able to do other things with it, and other stakeholders within the BSS or within the enterprise in and of itself get quicker access, more accurate access, or flexible access to data and events that are not necessarily going, as you alluded to, into the billing system per se, but it's important information and data. So that's a great example of that processing flexibility that isn't just for billing. It's for your entire BSS. How do you process information and get it to the people that need it in a timely and efficient manner? That's a great example.
So, Gunnar, did we get all your questions? Here's what I've heard is the ability to consume anything, call it mediation, right? And whatever the 2023 landscape dictates, or whatever it is, and then the ability to configure, not just from a product perspective, but also from an integration perspective, which Gunnar picks out well. Is there anything else that you guys would consider critical?
Yeah, so one case that as far as I remember in the project, that's also a very common case that you have when you change the payment gateway. So banks, they are very difficult. They have very strict rules. Every project that you have to deal with that, if you have to do a new interface, and if you do that in a configuration, you can save 2 months, 3 months of coding. Just change would be the endpoint. Endpoint would be the payment gateway, for example. Like we have some case that you just have to redirect the user and that's it. You don't need to be worried about the credit card, anything, just go there and do whatever you need and just come back with us with the information. So I saw some case that payment gateways also is a very critical change in the companies because that is, it works with money. So nobody likes to move the money from one place to another to be sure that everything is working fine.
Mm-hmm.
So in terms of the billing process inside a system you pick, you can sometimes look at billing as a process, similar to when you have involve a BPM in your overall architecture with the business process management. How can you possibly relate that into billing and avoid getting into the situations like Marcos you mentioned with all the spreadsheets and stuff where you implement more like a billing process inside the transformation?
Well, you need to make sure that you have all the separate blocks. Your system is able to provide all the separate blocks. When I say separate blocks, we start from the customer data. You have to make sure that the customer, your subscribers, have all the information needed for the proper billing or the proper rating of the whatever service or product you need to monetize. You have to have the proper product catalog with all the different aspects you want to include. Like Felipe was saying before, all the rating keys. You have to be able to capture the information from the external system, from the mediation or the external source of information. If you have all these pieces available, and your system is able to work with all these different pieces, and then yes, you have the recipe for a proper billing and a proper rating of any kind of service you need to monetize.
And one important point is that to make sure who is the system that is the master of the information. So, for example, CRM is the master of the customer address, contact information, billing. Billing is the system that is responsible, the master of the charge, the rating keys, how it will be generated, the charge, the taxes, and also have all the systems like that warehouse that is the ones that receive and put everybody together and to make the report needed. So also have to make sure that when you have a bunch of systems, you have defined which system will be responsible, master of which kind of data.
Exactly, and I think that's important when it comes to all the data sources, because rarely do you see a company having all the data in one place and very structured for every single service they sell. It's in a multiple sources. So the system will have to be able to go and point to the right place dependent on where you are in the process or what type of product or what customer you're rating this for, right?
Yeah, and probably if it is not well defined, you have become more cost because you have some reconciliation work. So have to make all the systems on sync to make sure it's working fine.
Is reconciliation work a big part of what you guys do? Or not?
I'm not sure if I follow.
I thought I heard you say reconciliation. Yes?
Yeah.
No?
Yeah, the reconciliation will be like Gunnar said, we have the customer information in one place, and we have the customer information in the CRM, in the billing. Who is the one that has the correct, the currency, who has the correct
sometimes this information get out of sync and you need to know which one has the truth, so you can copy it over to the wrong place.
Which goes back to who's the master.
The wrong information.
Goes back to who's the master. CRM, OSS, BSS.
Right.
Yeah.
And then that can be a challenge, especially if you have dual ownership or dual parentage for that data. Because at some point, where is the truth on that when you're going to correlate those events or whatever those items are together?
Yeah. And that happens as well when you have the billing system, the CRM, and also one system for the product catalog. That some system provides that as the billing system don't have a friendly interface to have a product catalog for the CSR. They use another system that has the product catalog, so that gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah, and if those aren't managed together in sync, as you were mentioning, it can become very challenging to downstream reconcile those differences of timing and ownership and the product catalog, like it's set up here in one system, but we're accessing it 2 weeks ago, but it doesn't update because the owner is CRM, for example, for the customer. Just different areas where that data and those processing can get out of sync, and that's an important challenge to make sure you have your head around, right, on how you're going to manage those items downstream and over time.
Yeah, and another important point, that every time that you add a new system, you have to make sure that you have to upgrade the system, and then that's all for all company. Upgrade the system is not very easy, it's an effort, like 6 months. So you have one
6
CRM
months.
system, or more.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Yeah.
Sometimes 1 year I saw some projects that took 2 years.
Oh my, 2 years?
Well, so you touch on a good point. So now when you looked at the transformation, you picked the right pieces, and everything is flexible and configurable. Everything's perfect. Now, how long time does that take? Are we talking the 2 years you're talking about, or should this be taken a few months?
Well, it always depends on the complexity of the project.
Yeah.
But and how many people have in the projects as well.
Good
but
answer.
2 years seems, I think it's too long for me for a regular project, for a regular billing project.
Yeah, what I saw in my experience in upgrade system, I saw 6 months because it was as is, and 1 year and a half because we started the upgrade of our billing system, and then we had the CRM system doing the upgrade. And then, oh my God, we have to make sure that the system are connecting correctly, because we review the integration, all the stuff, and regression tests to make sure that everything goes smoothly. Because there are some cases that if the upgrade does not work properly, I saw some case in the real life that the end customer, the one that using the system, was around 3 or 4 months without be charged.
Yeah.
And in some countries, once you reach a point like 6 months or a specific time, you cannot charge the customer anymore. So it's lost money.
So we talked about CRM, ERP, different other systems here. So many times I hear, well, we can tweak our system to do what we got to do. We can make the ERP system do this billing, and we can make do with what we have. It may take a little longer time, etc. What are your advice to people going down this path and trying to morph an ERP into doing the billing because it can?
Well, if I would be the owner of the company, I would ask some use case, like studies, like to make sure, because a billing system is a system ready to do a billing system. So when you add the ERP to do the billing system, it's very clear he's not the master of billing techniques. Correct? So we have to make sure that I would like to see the use case of it, like how it's implemented, and I would need more information.
And one aspect that I believe that many people that follow this path doesn't see before is that, okay, the ERP can be adapted or can be customized to deal with the billing requirements now. But what about the future?
Exactly.
It's likely that we'll need further customization, and can be very costly and all that. A long project,
coding versus configuration.
Exactly, and there's always a chance that it will require big customization, even for easy things like adding a new type of business, or even change existing ones. Yeah. So I think that's the main concern I would have.
Yeah, it goes back to having the complete flexibility and being able to configure your business.
Yes, because just a point that every time that you have a system that you have to add a lot of customization, if you think that one system that you have to do the upgrading for 3 years. So if you do the upgrade in a system that have only configuration and just have to copy and paste most likely, and you have one system that has a lot of customization, so make sure probably you have at least 1 year plus in the project to do the upgrade, and which means money.
Mm-hmm.
And you may not know either, how many industries are we not talking to where you don't know where this industry is going in the next 5 years. You may know that what you're doing now is not going to go away, but there are still going to be impact and new businesses happening. You will morph it into different way of doing things. Whether you talk about financial services or telco or travel industry, things are changing. And whoever think their business is going to be static in the next 5 years is probably not going to be the leader in 5 years.
Well said.
Yeah. So that agility and that functionality, flexibility of changing your processes through configuration, adaptability that comes at a much lower cost of entry, if you will. So if I want to change something, it's a configuration. I'm not reinventing custom code each time. So I think you brought up a couple of good points there regarding customization software versus the reconfiguration, using that configuration model. That's adaptive, that's future-proof, and that's agile when you use configurations versus hard coding. At least that seems to be my experience and impression of those items. So as you pick a solution going forward to be agile, to be flexible, to be changeable over time, to adapt to your changing market, I would think those would be some key points you would want to make sure your solution can bring to bear on your business over time. Any thoughts?
Yep, absolutely.
Good. I'm not crazy. I love it.
No, you're not.
All right.
But here's the interesting part the interesting part that Louise brings up, right? Is that a lot of people, I think, say, well, I have a complex billing requirement. So I need a complex, capable billing solution so that I can customize what I need for my business, which Gunnar also suggests correctly that, over the next 5 years, that can kind of take a lot of different flavors. So, but as a business owner, as an IT leader, or as a billing manager, you have to realize that, as you customize this thing to satisfy your business, is that you're adding, more and more and more girth to the overall stack. And that inevitably, when you need to upgrade, it's going to take a little bit more. Yeah, so when you want it the way you want it, which is the way you need it, right? You have to kind of understand that customization can translate into, giving me what I need immediately, but then there's an ongoing TCO associated with it that you have to take into account.
Well, that's that classic pitfall. There's never time to do it right, but always time to do it over. Mm-hmm. So you kind of need to be able to balance this. That's the beauty of the configuration model.
Correct.
So you're not, when you go to redo it, that effort is here instead of here.
Yep.
And then when you do the customization model without the configuration, you're just adding the pain to the flexibility and growth over time, because you're not being flexible with how you're doing it. I just need this right now. To me, that's always an effort or a project decision that you need to kind of review for long-term effects of it, because it's always quick and easy sometimes to go, oh, I can just fix this right now, versus, well, let's rechange the configuration and make sure that it works across the board, and don't put one of those little linchpins down that now everything has to spin around because You only implemented part of it.
There you go. So test customization, TCO, going to be a part of it, but as long as you can configure versus code, your TCO is going to be lower.
Yeah.
Bottom line, right? So, all right. So I want to get back into a little more technology here. You guys have been doing this. How many projects have you been involved with in your career? Marcos, how many billing projects? More than 20?
More than 20? No, I don't think so. I would say around 15.
15-ish? How about you, Luis?
Oh, probably around since 2002. So around, I could say 20.
All right. So a lot of experience.
It's one per year. Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to ask you two questions. So the first one is that when you think about all of those projects and you think about, the most headache and the most frustration that you had, and if you remove politics and if you remove people or business issues, what was the biggest technical challenge that you had on a project that you can think of?
Yeah, I'm trying to think here when you said
I threw you curveball.
politics and all that.
I threw you curveball.
I think it clean all the.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. So you think
the
about that
main
for a
reasons.
second. Think about that for a second. Are you ready to go, Luis? You got something?
No, actually, what Mark said. When you remove the politician and all this stuff,
It's easy.
It seems everything else is easy.
So basically, we've answered the question.
If you could just get rid of the people and their agendas, then make this. We can make this stuff work. Boom, on time and on budget. I love it. Good
The
job.
technical aspect is usually easy. The people that,
And
that
well
mess the
said.
project.
Yeah, and it may be something a decision that was made long ago that now you're having to figure out how do you work around that, because there's a legacy system or there's a process in place or a vendor that's involved in that is not quite easy to work with on one of these things. So it's nothing about the technical piece that's really so difficult to solve.
It's the politics and the
it's
people,
the timing,
and the
it's
agendas, and all
grouping,
and the orchestration.
Yeah.
I believe that one of the projects that I have worked on is that you have to make sure deliver that, because every project you have a date to put in production. So if you don't put in that date, we lose the window and the customer gets frustrated, and then he can lose money because, let's say, in the telco industry, every time you have so we have the Valentine's Day, so we have the Father's Day, so we have to work very tough to make sure that we deliver on time. And that, I think that's the most challenging in every project, because
The schedule.
nobody wants to, schedule, exactly. So sometimes it's not easy, even that when, for example, the customer wants to, let's say, upgrade the system. Why do we upgrade the system? Oh, because I want a faster system and a system with less bug and more functionality. And because we have, for example, customers that has 5, 10 bill cycles in a month. So they have to make sure that to run 12 process in one day. So that would be the challenge, that we will do that every time in the schedule, and also to avoid any impact in the end customer. So I saw a lot that in the upgrade systems, that we have to move terabyte data to one machine to another, and for the end customer, he cannot feel anything.
Yeah. Just wave the wand, wave a magic wand. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, so
you can drive copy that.
So I just rattled off rating engine, catalog, integration, consumption, settlement,
Conversion.
Data conversion. Which of those do you? What do you guys out of that list? What's easy? What's tough? What when you think about a BSS, the elements of a BSS, what do you think are just the hardest for a practitioner to kind of get their arms around and become familiar with, and be? What's the biggest learning curve? What's the toughest stuff?
I don't know if it's the toughest, but one of the always challenging parts is the integration. because you have to talk to other teams, and sometimes you have to understand the other teams, and these people also need to understand your system. It's not always easy for people to talk or come to common knowledge, and also all the challenges involved. Sometimes one system needs to provide some information slightly different from what they are used to, and we sometimes have to adapt to their output, and vice versa is also true. This is, in my opinion, this is one of the most challenging parts of the project.
How about you, Luis?
Also the customer expectation. So we start a project, we have the requirements, and all the time the customer, he changed all the customers changed the requirements during the project. So we have to attend his expectation, and then we have to so that's a very tough, because you have to make sure that the customer is happy. We cannot say all the time no, but you cannot say all the time yes, because also you don't work for free. So exactly. So that's the point that is very tough, that we try to do the best for the client. And also we have to understand, because every project is new when I work here, I have to understand how the customer thinks, how the ecosystem works.
But then the customer is just going to tell you, Louise, here's my business requirements. I've documented it. It's very thoroughly. Here you go. Right. Well, first of all, either it's one of the two, right? Either you get nothing, right? Or you get a one-line business requirement.
Make it do that.
Right? Or, the other side of the equation is that they spend 3 years building their requirements, right? Down to the nets.
They could have written it 3 times in the time it took to write the requirements.
Yeah.
So it's no longer the same 3 years later.
But inevitably, it always changes. It always changes, doesn't it?
Sometimes well documented, but when you start reading, or when reality comes, you see that it's totally outdated, and what is documented
is not the documentation. Yes,
it's not how it looks like.
So that would lend itself to more of an agile, iterative development approach to business requirement finalization.
Yep.
Yes.
And configuration based, right? Because if you're doing this with configurations, it's easy to do those steps and then say, oh, you know what? We've changed these APIs and these configurations to do this now. It's not a back office change per se. It's a front end configuration change.
I'm having a little of an aha moment here as I sit here and I talk with these two guys, is that the software usually works, right? And the technology independent of itself usually works. But the real challenge is not the software. It's customer expectations, unrealistic schedules. It's business requirements that kind of continue.
They ebb and flow during the project,
right? And of course, in the integration process, am I oversimplifying that things, guys? And then you got the political agendas and all the other guys.
Yeah, I think that's the right path, because usually that's the point that when you start a project, that's not something that is maintenance, like a managed service, like you have a date to start and a date to finish, and the customer has a reason to finish on that date, because he has the budget of the year. So, and then if you cannot handle that schedule, he has to bring these points to the high management, and also open a lot of discussion. So every project you have these tough points. And I think the point that Brian said, that the configuration. So a good example, for example, we have the requirement, we have to put the very simple last, first, and the SSN number. And then, oh no, we have a change in requirement, we have to add the email. We need that. Okay, that's something easy, let's do that. So if you're doing the configuration, that's very more easier to say yes, then we have to change the code.
Yeah.
So, and then that makes the beauty of the configuration.
So can I ask a question? Can I ask a related question? All right. So we throw configuration word around on these podcasts like candy. All right. Configuration versus code. Right. So I'm just curious. You guys have worked with different billing systems, right? Multiple billing systems. Are there ones where you really have to code versus configure?
Yeah, and not only code, but what I have seen before. Remember when we were talking in the beginning about the incoming format or the layout for receiving records from mediation. So what I have seen before is like a system that had multiple spare fields that were like wildcards. That was a wildcard name like field 1, field 2, and then you can accommodate anything in there. So for one client, this field will mean something, and in another client, it's going to mean something totally different. Even for someone that from the support system, will be harder to understand how this field works, because they would need to know or access a documentation to know exactly what this field is, because just based on the field name in the database, you won't be able to do that.
Cool. And would you guys agree with this statement? Part of configuration is the software has already been written to allow you to use a configuration or a tool to help generate those field lists, those mappings, those sort of things that you want to do, refactor your API calls and things. The infrastructure in and of itself supports that more like an object-oriented sort of mentality where I code it once and I use it many times. I can change my configuration. I'm not really changing the base code. It knows what a field is. It knows where a destination is, endpoints, those kind of things. Because my experience on some of these items has been if you don't have those tools that help you manage all of these little detail points in a generic way, with like you were mentioning, the field 1, 2, 3, and 4, etc. I'm not coding anything to the field. I know what I've got a field. I'm going to do something, and we have a whole list of things that we can do with our configuration for that one field or that one something. Is that a reasonable kind of roll up of what that concept is for configuration versus just coding? Because the just coding part means you're going to code all these things up, but if you've taken this and said, hey, I know I'm going to take a data feed in and it's got 500 fields in it. I need to do something with it. I don't want to start writing code that says field 1, field 2, field 3 for every single feed we get. No, that's to me, that's coding it, as opposed to an engine that says, when I put this in my ingestion module, my mediation collector, I'm able to take a configuration that says, this is the structure coming in, morph it to this. That's what I do with it. So I'm not, that other base code is just part of your system. Is that an accurate way that you would think of this, or do you have a different kind of take on that configuration versus code? Because there's always code in the background that's running.
Yep.
But you're changing with the engines. You've got an engine that when you put this fuel in, out comes this. When you put this in, out comes that. And you can change that by putting different kind of filters over the top of it, if you will, with your configuration.
But in the end, always when you have the configuration to help you out to change the system, you can save 70% of your time, 80% of the coding time. Yeah. But some cases you also have to, of course, to test, make sure that it's working, and also at some point you have to do some slightly change in the coding. But the idea of the configuration, to have a system that is configurable, it saves at least major time that you don't need to start from the scratch. You have already something ready. So, for example, when you have I have to build a new integration, or I have to send another file format. When you do the coding, you have to build from the scratch the file, how do you format the file, everything. But if you do the configuration, you should have to prepare the SQL to extract the information, but you have already the structure that save you, instead to do that in 2 weeks, you can do that in 2 days. Yeah. So the configuration gives you a support to avoid something that you don't need to do that. You have to worry more about the logic the intelligence, and then the structure, the like a framework.
Yeah.
So
totally agree with that. That's a great way to an analogy to put that. You have a functional framework that you can just keep adding pieces and moving pieces around. It's like one of those erector sets where you can plug different things on. And every now and again you go, I need a new piece that will fit in there. And that would be something you would develop as custom code. But since you're going to make it fit into your framework, it's really reusable all over the place for the most part with your configurations, new APIs, etc.
And there is some case that from our experience that we start a project and let's say that we use this framework to help us to build a new, let's say, integration. And then we saw that so good that this coding that we can add that in the product. So that won't be any more coding. It will be more configuration. So you're not the first time you spend when you build that, you spend let's say 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and the next time will be 1 day. Yeah. I saw that happen.
Man, can I ask a couple questions about some other pieces of BSS? I want to go product catalog, right? Just for a second.
Yeah, absolutely. Because that smacks people in the head all the time.
So I've sized projects where I had a customer that had over 2,000 offerings in a product catalog, right? And I've heard that most of the times they just evolve over time, then they kind of get gluttonous, and then they
just build a new one,
and then they just keep adding to it, and then people start, then they kind of sit there, and then they start collecting dust, and they don't use them. Maybe you guys talk a little bit about product catalog. Biggest ones you've seen, biggest challenges you've seen with product catalog, abuses of it, or things like that. Anything you can kind of share with me just about product catalog?
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, man, go for it.
Well, I believe that the product catalog would be the entry for the customer.
Okay.
So, because in the end, that's the point that makes the customer buy the product. So we have the bundle, we have a phone that can do 5,000 minutes for free. So the product catalog is the one that brings the company for our billing system. That's in the end, that's the first step to have a customer. And also that involves the marketing area. And I saw a case that the customer has so many product catalogs, they are not able to concentrate in what the customer needs. Because we have a lot of offers. So we have to consolidate, let's remove. So, and also the companies do a lot of study.
But they don't really remove them, do they? They just kind of keep them in there.
They keep like a backup plan.
Yeah. Remember when we talked about ownership and truth?
Yeah.
Early on in this conversation, the product catalog often has the most lies in it of anything in your system.
Ooh,
because people set these things up. They set them up and they go, hey, next week we're going to do a new offering. We're going to set this up so you can buy, 500 minutes for $12 today, or whatever the occasion may be. Hey, World Cup, we're hosting it this year. I got a World Cup thing. Well, you don't get the World Cup every year, but that product sits out there, 37 flavors of it. And there's still people that have that product on their account. So how do you clean that up? What's the add, change, and delete of products? So you get that bloat in your system, and eventually you're like, let's run a report on what products we have. And somebody goes, oh my God, it's 700 pages long. I don't know what any of these are.
And we're only using 10%.
Well, we're not really sure. Who's on this that's still legacy from our accounts that signed up for it? Do we have the expiration dates on it? Because we run into no expiration date, and I'm sure you have on many occasions, where it's not quite clean. It's not fresh. It's not crisp. There's 10,000 things in there, and they're all with a life cycle of their own.
What have you guys seen, man? What have you guys seen?
I remember a customer that I worked for, like we said before, about having two systems with the same information. The owner of the product catalog was a CRM, and the billing system was working, had a feature that allowed like a custom rate. So you could have the same bundle, the same package with different price according to the customers. So, but for the CRM, each customer had its own version of the bundle. So let's say bundle ABC. Mm-hmm. So in the CRM we have different flavors, and in the billing system we had only one. So sometimes it was hard to find what was the original name of the bundle in the CRM, because in our side was only one, and in CRM could be any number, could be hundreds of the same.
And that probably caused more reconciliation and cleanup, and
finance loves that. They love that. They don't just have as many same name things with a different rate to it as possible. They never get mad about that.
The audit people, for some reason,
they bring out the big stick on that one.
What do you think, Louise? What about you, brother?
Well, like the product, I saw some case that the customer has a lot of product offerings, and one particular case very funny is that they have to keep one product offering because they have a special corporate account, and they cannot remove it at all. So that are old bundle, so it was tough for every system to keep that. So yeah. I think that was that was interesting. I never saw that. And then why do we have this product offering? Just one client, and then I saw the client 5,000 or 10,000 clients.
Oh man,
corporate account. So
yeah, I think I remember something with my cohort across the desk here of a plan that was tied back to ownership.
Yep.
And the ownership of the company had a special plan, and there was all kinds of workarounds and money and dollars.
And they didn't want to change it, even though it was a legacy, sort of product catalog entry. But by golly, you're not changing that one.
Don't you touch that one. Don't you touch that one.
No.
Yeah.
So you just look at it and you're like, all right, well, that's one of those things where you have to write that custom code, because even your configuration model is tied to how old this thing is.
So it sounds like product catalogs just get outdated, they get dusty, they're not used, they're not cleaned up.
It's truth and ownership.
They're probably not really cleaned up. And then as Marcos identifies, you've got conflicts with other systems that will conflict with the offering in the product catalog, which kind of creates reconciliation and
active versus deactive programs in your product catalog. If you are going to sunset something, what is that process when it relates to your product catalog? This is just one of my experiences. Is that there'll be people that'll say, "Oh, we don't offer that anymore."
Yeah.
But we're not going to take it out of the system. We're not even going to hide it with a different view, for example. It's still there. And sometimes somebody will go in and they'll click on it. They'll misenter which product they are assigning to a customer. And all of a sudden, this inactive, now active thing is back up, because the billing system doesn't care. It just dips that database, pulls that up, does this, moves that, runs the bill cycle, and off it goes. But yet everyone else is seeing a product that it's not supposed to have any customers on it.
There you go.
Well, let's go ahead and explain that one.
Well, I don't know about that. I don't know about you, man, but I'm thinking it's really been illuminating here for me to kind of, because we're going to have some additional panelists on that are practitioners. But the number one takeaway for me is that it's not the software, right? It's the integration, but the bigger issue is the people and the schedule and the agendas that really kind of cause all the problems.
Well, and it's not so much that it's problems. If I was to ask everybody the top 3 things that they would want to consider to help make a BSS project move forward correctly, and I'll start off with the speed round.
All right.
What 3 things would help answer some of those questions? Well, one is an understanding of whatever data goes into your system, it's going to have to come out at some point. any products, catalogs, or what have you that you put in there, you need expiration dates on them. You need to understand which ones are associated with what product. That I call visibility. Your visibility goggles, and you need to have that because
Right.
you need to see that. When you talk about the interaction of people on a large project, strong project management skills are required.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have that look that's above out of everybody's silo, and this is something I've seen recently, is the number of multi-vendor scenarios that are set up. Everybody has their own PM, but that SI, that system integrator view that needs to be up there, I think is overlooked.
Paramount.
It's overlooked in the importance in order to generate success with a complex BSS system. The third piece is going to be configuration versus coding. You know, if you can do that, that's going to save you time and money. So feel free to reuse anything I said.
What do you
If
think,
those are
guys?
yours,
What are your
yours?
biggest attributes to successful BSS deployments?
Yeah, I believe to like some case I saw that sometimes it's better to keep split the project, and when you start your requirements, the requirements get too big. Let's split to keep simple. Let's reach sometimes. I want 10 functionality. Wait a minute. Why do we need that? Let's review that. Let's split that in phases. Because in the end, we have to reach the go live, because the money is not doing the project. The money is when you have the project, the product can go live, even for the vendors, even for the clients. So I think that will keep simple the project and try, if we have to add more, break down in phase. I think that would be.
So phased, starting with simple, and then
Yeah.
get more progressive. All right.
Yeah, exactly. And then because it's not only that, because you have a new system, you have to train people, because you don't have a well-trained people. Like, we don't like to call the CSR guys and, hey, this guy don't know what he's doing. And everybody gets frustrated. So, because if you have a very trained people, there's a very good user experience. And because the build system is not just a software, it's an ecosystem. We have a lot of people in a company when you have a new system around it. We have like the vendors, we have the people that work in the reports, we have a lot of people. So I would say that keep simple and try to improve the project, the product based in the next phase.
There we go. So as you kind of have subsequent releases, continue to extend and enhance the core services, the bundles, and whatever it is, right?
Yeah.
Cool beans. How about you, Marcos? What else you got?
No, I think it's a good approach, starting with what's really required, what is a must-have, and leaving everything else for another phase. Because, like Philippe said, one of the big challenges as well is the learning curve. So, especially when we are talking about greenfield, the customer needs to understand how your product works and all the features and all the capabilities, and then be able to imagine new things and add new requirements, or even adapt what they started, the initial plan, and to get the most of your season.
Good stuff, man.
Yeah. Well, very well said.
Mm-hmm.
When I was hearing Luis talk and come back with that iterative approach, keep it simple, keep it at a size you can chop and work through at a steady pace. That fits in the model of configuration versus coding, agility, flexibility.
That is sound. It sounds oversimplified.
It's hard.
Right?
It's hard to do if you don't keep your mind on the ball with this.
Well, it sounds oversimplified, but inevitably, everybody wants to kind of keep adding and putting it in there, and they start putting, hey, I'll throw this in there, and then you're trying to scramble and you're trying to get to a release date, and you end up with
change control 27 on
change
week
control
3.
27, and it's just aggravating.
It could be a challenge.
So I cannot agree with both of you more on simple first, phased deployment, training, reacclimation to different other people. A lot of people getting around new systems, and dealing with a realistic phased deployment is the right way to go.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
I think we covered some great stuff there.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, man. These guys are 3 hours ahead of us on Friday.
On a Friday. Well, we're sorry we're cutting into your Friday time. We blame time zones.
I think it's Kachaka time is what it is down in Brazil. So, you guys, thank you very much for joining in. I very much appreciate it. Give home and enjoy some time with your families, and look forward to your attendance. And if you have more questions or thoughts on Revenue Uncoded, ideas now that you kind of gone through this, man, please let Tim Pintar know, our associate in the wings over here, or Brian and myself. But thank you and very much for coming on to another edition of Revenue Uncoded.
That's our technical.
That's our sign out there.
There you go.
Hey, man, have a great weekend, man.
Appreciate it.
Cheers.
Have a good one. Bye-bye.